Long ago, in a small town in America, there was a boy named Harland Sanders. He was not rich. In fact, his family was very poor. Harland was born in 1890 in a small house in Indiana. His father worked on a farm. His mother worked very hard at home. Life was simple, but the family was happy. But one day, something terrible happened. When Harland was only 5 years old, his father suddenly died. Everything changed. His mother had to leave home every day to work in a factory. She worked long hours. That meant little Harland had to stay home and take care of his younger brother and sister. He was only 5 years old. Most children at that age play with toys, but Harland had to cook. At first, he did not know how. The kitchen was scary. The fire was hot. The pots were heavy. But slowly, day by day, Harland learned something important. He learned how to cook. He learned how to make bread. He learned how to cook vegetables. And one day, he tried cooking chicken. No one knew it at the time, but that little boy cooking in a small kitchen would one day create one of the most famous foods in the world. Years later, people everywhere would know the name Kentucky Fried Chicken. But Harland's life did not become easier. In fact, things became even harder. When Harland was 12 years old, his mother got married again. His stepfather did not like him. The man was angry and strict. He did not want Harland in the house. So Harland made a difficult decision. He left home. He was only a boy. He had no money, no education, no clear future. But he had something special. He had determination. And that determination would change his life. Harland began working very young. He worked on farms. He worked as a streetcar conductor. He even joined the army for a short time. But one thing was always the same. Nothing worked out. Every job ended. Every opportunity disappeared, and failure seemed to follow him everywhere. But Harland Sanders did not know something important yet. All those failures were preparing him for something bigger, something that would come much later, much later. Because sometimes success takes time, and sometimes success waits for you to be ready.
After Harland Sanders left home at a young age, life became very difficult. He had no education, he had no money, and he had no one to guide him. So he did what many young men did at that time. He looked for work, any work. At 16 years old, Harland joined the army. He was sent to Cuba for a short time, but his military career did not last long. Soon he returned to the United States. After that, Harland tried many different jobs. He worked as a farm worker. Then he worked as a streetcar conductor. Later, he became a railroad fireman, someone who helped run the train engines. But something strange kept happening. Every job ended badly. Sometimes he was fired. Sometimes the company closed. Sometimes he simply failed. One time he worked as an insurance salesman, but he argued with his boss and he lost the job. Another time he studied law and became a lawyer. It seemed like his life was finally improving. But one day, during a court case, he got into a fight with his own client. Yes, a fight. After that incident, his career as a lawyer was over.
By the time Harland Sanders was 40 years old, his life looked like a long list of failures. Job after job. Dream after dream. Nothing seemed to work. Many people around him believed he would never succeed. But inside Harland Sanders, something still burned, a small fire of hope. He still believed his life could change. And one day, something interesting happened. Harland Sanders began working at a gas station in a small town in Kentucky. It was a quiet place. Cars stopped there to buy gasoline. Drivers often felt tired and hungry after long trips. One day, Harland had an idea. He thought, what if I cook food for these travelers? At first, he did something very simple. He cooked meals in a small kitchen behind the gas station. Ham, biscuits, vegetables, and, of course, chicken. Travelers loved the food. More and more people stopped there. Soon, Harland Sanders became famous in the area. People didn't just come for gasoline anymore. They came for his cooking. The small gas station slowly turned into a small restaurant, and Harland Sanders discovered something important. Cooking was not just a job, it was his talent. He especially loved cooking fried chicken. But Harland wanted his chicken to be special, different from any other chicken. So he started experimenting. Different spices, different cooking times, different methods. Late at night, when everyone else was asleep, Harland stayed in the kitchen, testing recipes, mixing spices, trying again and again. Finally, after many attempts, he created something incredible, a special fried chicken recipe, a recipe made with 11 herbs and spices. It was crispy, juicy, full of flavor, and people loved it. Harland Sanders did not know it yet, but this recipe would one day make him famous all around the world. However, life was not finished testing him, because just when his restaurant became successful, something terrible happened, something that almost destroyed everything. And once again, Harland Sanders would lose everything he built. By the early 1930s, Harland Sanders' small restaurant was becoming very popular. Travelers stopped there every day. Truck drivers told their friends about the place. Families came from nearby towns. They all wanted to taste Harland's cooking, especially his fried chicken. At that time, fried chicken usually took a long time to cook, sometimes more than 30 minutes. But Harland wanted something better. He wanted chicken that was fast, crispy, and delicious. So he kept experimenting. One day, he tried something new. He used a pressure cooker. This machine could cook food much faster. The chicken stayed juicy inside, but the outside became crispy. People loved it. Soon, his fried chicken became famous across Kentucky. The restaurant grew bigger. More tables, more customers, more workers. Life finally seemed to be improving. After many years of failure, Harland Sanders was finally finding success. Then one day, disaster struck. A terrible fire started in the building. No one knew exactly how it began, but the flames spread quickly. The wooden building burned fast. People ran outside. Workers tried to save what they could, but it was too late. Within hours, the entire restaurant was destroyed. Everything was gone. The kitchen, the tables, the equipment. Years of hard work disappeared in a single night. For most people, this would have been the end. Many people would give up. Many people would say, maybe I am just unlucky. But Harland Sanders was not like most people. Instead of quitting, he started again. He rebuilt the restaurant, piece by piece, brick by brick. It took time, it took money, it took courage, But slowly, the restaurant came back to life, and this time it became even more successful. In fact, the governor of Kentucky heard about Harland Sanders and his famous chicken. The food was so good that people across the state talked about it. In 1935, the governor gave him a special title, Kentucky Colonel. This was an honor given to people who helped the state of Kentucky. From that day on, people began calling him Colonel Sanders. It sounded important. It sounded respected. But even though things were improving, another challenge was waiting, a much bigger one. Because in the 1950s, something unexpected happened. A new highway was built, and it changed everything. The highway moved traffic away from Harland's restaurant. Fewer travelers passed by. Fewer customers stopped. Slowly, business began to disappear. And once again, Harland Sanders faced another disaster. At 65 years old, most people retire. Most people stop working. But Harland Sanders was about to begin the most difficult journey of his life, a journey that would include over 1,000 rejections, and almost no one believed he could succeed. By the early 1950s, Harland Sanders faced another terrible moment in his life. The new highway had changed everything. Cars no longer passed his restaurant. Travelers stopped going there. Day by day, the number of customers became smaller. Soon, the restaurant could not survive anymore. After all those years of hard work, Harland Sanders had to close his business. He sold what he could, he paid his debts, and at the end, he had very little money left. He was 65 years old. Most people at that age retire. Most people stop chasing dreams. But Harland Sanders was not ready to stop. One day, he received his first Social Security check. It was only $105. For many people, this would feel like the end of the road. But Harland Sanders had an idea. He believed his fried chicken recipe was special. He believed restaurants everywhere would want to use it. So he made a bold plan. He would travel across America. He would visit restaurants. He would show them his chicken recipe. And if they liked it, they could sell his chicken. In return, he would receive a small payment for every chicken they sold. It sounded like a good idea, but the reality was much harder. Harland Sanders packed his car with spices and cooking tools. Then he began driving across the country, city after city, restaurant after restaurant. Each time he visited a restaurant, he made the same offer. He would cook his fried chicken for the owner. If the owner liked it, they could use his recipe. And they would pay him a small fee. But most people said no. Some restaurant owners laughed. Some said his idea was impossible. Some didn't even taste the chicken. Harland Sanders kept driving. He slept in his car many nights. Sometimes he didn't have enough money for a hotel. Sometimes he didn't know where his next meal would come from. But he kept going. Rejection after rejection. No after no. Failure after failure. One restaurant owner said, "Nobody will buy fried chicken like this." Another said, "We already have our own menu." Another simply said, "Not interested." Harland Sanders heard the word no again and again, 10 times, 50 times, 100 times, 200 times. Still, he kept going. Many people would have given up. Many people would have said, maybe this dream is impossible. But Harland Sanders believed something important. He believed the right person would say yes. So he kept knocking on doors, year after year, restaurant after restaurant. Finally, after 1,009 rejections, someone said something different. Someone said yes. That moment changed everything, because that one yes was the beginning of a global empire, an empire that the world would later know as KFC. But the story was not finished yet, because after that first yes, something incredible began to happen. More restaurants joined, more people tasted the chicken, and soon the world would meet a smiling old man with white hair, glasses, and a black tie. A man who proved one powerful truth: it is never too late to succeed.
The chicken that conquered America. Colonel Harland Sanders. After hearing no more than 1,000 times, Harland Sanders finally heard the word he had been waiting for. Yes. A restaurant owner agreed to try his fried chicken recipe. Harland went into the kitchen and prepared the chicken himself. He mixed his secret spices. He coated the chicken carefully. Then he cooked it using his special pressure cooker. Soon the smell of fried chicken filled the restaurant. Golden, crispy, juicy. When the restaurant owner tasted the chicken, his eyes grew wide. It was delicious. He immediately knew this recipe was something special. So he agreed to a simple deal. He would sell Harland Sanders fried chicken in his restaurant, and for every piece of chicken sold, Harland Sanders would receive a small payment. This was the first franchise restaurant, and it was only the beginning. Harland Sanders continued traveling across the country, but now something had changed. Instead of only hearing no, he sometimes heard yes. Slowly more restaurants joined. 5 restaurants, 10 restaurants, 20 restaurants. Soon the number began to grow quickly. Restaurant owners saw that customers loved the chicken, the crispy skin, the juicy meat, and the mysterious flavor from the 11 herbs and spices. People kept asking the same question: what makes this chicken so special? But Harland Sanders never revealed the full recipe. It was a secret that became part of the brand. To promote the business, Harland Sanders began dressing in a very special way. He wore a white suit, a black string tie, and his famous white beard. He looked friendly. He looked unique. People remembered him everywhere he went. Soon he became the face of his own brand. Restaurants proudly showed his picture on their signs. By the early 1960s, the business had exploded. Hundreds of restaurants across America were selling his fried chicken. And the brand had an official name: Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC. The little recipe that started in a small kitchen was now becoming famous, not just in Kentucky, not just in America, but across the world. Harland Sanders had spent most of his life failing, but suddenly everything was changing, and the world was about to meet one of the most recognizable businessmen in history. But even success brought a new challenge. The business had grown so large that Harland Sanders could no longer manage it alone. He was already in his 70s. Running a huge company was becoming too difficult, so he had to make one of the biggest decisions of his life. Should he keep the company, or should he sell it? That decision would change his life forever. By the early 1960s, Harland Sanders' fried chicken business had grown far beyond his expectations. Restaurants across America were selling his chicken. More and more people were discovering the taste of his famous recipe. The brand Kentucky Fried Chicken was spreading quickly. But there was one problem. Harland Sanders was already getting old. He was in his 70s. Running a large company was becoming very difficult for him.
Managing hundreds of restaurants required a lot of time and energy. Finally, in 1964, Harland Sanders made a big decision. He decided to sell the company. A group of investors offered to buy the business for $2 million. At that time, it was a huge amount of money. Harland Sanders accepted the offer. But there was one important condition. Even though he sold the company, he wanted to remain the face of the brand. The new owners agreed. From that moment on, Harland Sanders became the official ambassador of Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC. He traveled around the world. He visited restaurants. He appeared in advertisements. People everywhere recognized him immediately. The white suit, the black string tie, the warm smile, and his famous white beard. Colonel Sanders became one of the most recognizable faces in the world. The brand continued to grow rapidly. New restaurants opened in different countries. Soon, Kentucky Fried Chicken was no longer just an American restaurant. It had become a global brand. Millions of people were eating his chicken every day. And it all started with one simple recipe. A recipe created by a man who refused to give up. Harland Sanders lived to the age of 90 years old. During his lifetime, he saw his dream spread across the world. Before he died, thousands of restaurants were already selling his fried chicken. Today, Kentucky Fried Chicken has tens of thousands of restaurants around the world. And the smiling face of Colonel Sanders is still on the sign. But the most powerful part of this story is not about fried chicken. It is about perseverance. Harland Sanders failed again and again. He lost jobs. He lost businesses. He lost money. And at 65 years old, when many people think life is already finished, he started something new. And that decision changed his life forever. His story teaches us something very important. Success does not always come early. Sometimes success comes after many failures. Sometimes success comes when nobody believes in you. And sometimes success comes when you are brave enough to try one more time. So remember this simple lesson from Colonel Sanders. It is never too late to follow your dream.